Welcome to the Digital Responsibility Podcast. There is a vibrant community around the world exploring how we drive forward digital innovation, products and services, and generally exploit technology progression for the sustained benefit of society and the planet. On this podcast, you will hear from me, Christopher Joinson, and Rob Price, two of the original founders of Corporate Digital Responsibility, as we speak to our guests to hear their stories and piece together what it means to be responsible in the digital age. If you'd like to learn more, take a look at the website, corporatedigitalresponsibility.net.
Welcome to episode 7 of the season 4 of the Digital Responsibility Podcast, and I'm delighted to be joined by Ioana Noula, who's I think in Greece today, and dialing in to talk to us about the work of the Internet Commission. So Ioana, would you like to introduce yourself and tell our listeners a bit about both yourself but also the work that the Internet Commission does?
Thank you for having me, Rob. As I said to the in my blog that acted as a prelude to this podcast, it's a wonderful opportunity for me to speak about corporate digital responsibility. It's a concept that at the Internet Commission we have been really thinking a lot about. So yes, let me start with introducing myself. I'm Ioana Noula. I am the co-founder and director of research for the Internet Commission. In the past, I have been wearing mostly an academic hat. I have a PhD in citizenship studies. I have worked in the University of Leeds, the UCL Institute of Education, as an education expert, an academic. And I am, since 2016, visiting fellow at the Department of Media and Communications at the London School of Economics. And I will take this opportunity to say that London School of Economics and the Department of Media and Communications offered the main platform and environment, the great environment where many people come together from different backgrounds with different identities and so on. And this is where the Internet Commission came to existence with conversations on these important topics of the backlash of digital technology, with Johnny Ship, who is my co-founder and colleague since 2016. And yeah, the Internet Commission was the culmination of a series of seminars and informal conversations about tech and data ethics and smart cities and education and so on. And these were the very, very stimulating discussions that amounted to the Internet Commission, which is now an organization, a non-profit organization that aims to advance digital responsibility and the accountability of tech companies. And it all happened against the backdrop of conversations about more regulation in 2016, 2018 with GDPR, as well as conversations about self-regulation, the failures of self-regulation, and conversations about social media companies' transparency reporting. And I will just close with this. I would say that transparency reports were a major thing happening at the time, and it seemed to be a solution to the problems. But we thought that transparency itself and self-reporting is not enough. Everything has to make sense for people, for citizens, for users, for policymakers, and it also needs to be asking the right questions.
And I think in many ways, I mean, we were chatting before we started the podcast, and it was interesting that we were both kind of, the work that we'd done around CDR, the work that you started with the Internet Commission, both dated back to about 2016. So there was clearly kind of more people beginning to think at that time about the impact of the way in which data, AI as an emergent kind of technology, and technology more broadly was used. We'll come back to it, no doubt, when we talk about the DSA later on. Now Johnny came on about a year ago and talked to us about, I think, just before the first accountability report was published, and you've just published the second accountability report. Now I think how it's felt during the pandemic is that more people have become aware of the need to do something differently. I'm interested what you found in terms of the difference between the accountability report over the year, or broadly a year between them. Had people changed? Had the organisations that you were working with evolved? Because the organisations that you've been working with are big organisations, aren't they? So it's great to see the desire from those organisations to want to be involved in an initiative like the one that you're running. So what did you see? What had changed?
Well, I think it's worth, first of all, reiterating for the audience some of these organizations. So, and for people to understand the size and impact and footprint and so on. So we're talking about the BBC. We're talking about Sony Interactive Entertainment, EMEA region, Sony PlayStation, basically. We're talking about Match Group, a dating company that came on with two companies, Meetic and Tinder. I don't want to miss someone. Pop Jam, a popular social media platform for children. And this year we had Twitch. So I think this is not exhaustive, but it you know, gives a flavor of the size of the companies as well as the diversity of the cohort. So we have news organizations, we have dating companies, we have children's platforms, live streaming platforms, and so on. So there is a great range of actors in our cohort. And when it comes to the change, I would say that the reporting process and what the internet does, we always describe it. We described it last year and this year in the new report as a journey, first and foremost. And it's a journey for both the Internet Commission as well as the companies participating in the reporting process. It is difficult for me to answer the difference and what could the pandemic could possibly, change, or how it comes in as a variable in the reporting process, in the sense that some of the companies did not take the second round, did not participate in the second round. Some others, they remained as members of our organization without reporting. So we didn't have significant information to witness change. We did, however, for instance, have Match Group, that is Meetic and Tinder, together with us in both cohorts. And we have identified the pressure that these companies were under, especially dating apps. It was kind of an explosive period for them, where people were seeking ways to communicate online, isolated people, and so on. And they did try to address the volume of content and activity on their platforms. And they were very, very mindful of the new harms, emerging harms of people wanting to participate and to be a part of the online world. But we were not able to really, spot specific actions, in the sense that these companies, I'll take Tinder, for instance, they're companies who were always mindful That's why, as I said in the blog, they are confident companies who always try to do the right thing, always try to improve. And the improvements that we saw may be attributed to the fact that, you know, the pressure of the pandemic made them more alert to risks. But at the same time, it's a company that cares and then wants to improve, and they have seen, you know, their weaknesses in the first report, and they want to do things better, and so on. So it's very difficult, I would say, at this stage. We don't have sufficient information and useful, meaningful, I would say, data that will help us identify this change.
That's really interesting. And one of the things we learned last time around from Johnny was how the Internet Commission takes the time to kind of look beyond the face of the platform and actually gets to know the organization itself, its culture, how it's structured, and how it focuses its effort and time. And you mentioned in your blog about the workshops that you run with them. It's not just a quantitative analysis, it's actually engagement to understand some of the complexities of their situation. I was wondering, in the process of engaging with these companies, was there anything that surprised you along the way in those conversations? And stacking up a second question, did they all realize the extent of their responsibility for how their platform is used, and kind of where they stand on that diffusion of responsibility, which you quoted so articulately in the blog?
Yes, thanks, Christopher. I think these questions are really giving me the opportunity to say something about my personal experience as a recovering, I will call myself, academic in the, you know, in the business and in the industry environment. So as a sociologist, as a, you know, of the critical school of thought, I have always been very cynical about, you know, the way profit-driven or profit-seeking businesses operate, and what is most important, what matters to them, and so on. And I approached this process of ours, this evaluation of ours, with an open mind. I try to leave cynicism behind. And I was positively surprised, I would say, to you know, get to the point of your question, and that is that because of the fact that I met people who are really motivated, who are really inspired and driven to do the right thing, and they see the benefits and the growth and the thriving of their platform in the improvement of the experience of their users and the improvement of what I call their civic footprint. So there are many very young, very bright people who have this drive. And then I must say that someone, you know, listening or reading my blog and so on, they may raise an eyebrow and say, well, hang on, Tinder, for instance, has a lot of baggage when it comes to, you know, their performance or outcomes and so on. How can you possibly be so enthusiastic about it? And my response to that will be that there is a distance, a very long distance from the people involved in our process and the boardroom, the people who make the decisions. And again, it's not my role, and it's not, you know, I don't have sufficient information to attribute intent in terms of how the decisions are made, and I cannot talk about malevolence and so on. What I can say is that the people that I have seen and I have worked with are, really inspiring people, and people who are, most importantly, willing to listen and who take feedback well. And I have seen them integrating the feedback that we give them, to the extent that we are able to see. So based on what they allow us to see, we are able to give them feedback on. And they allow us to see whatever they are allowed to show. So this takes me back to my initial statement about this being a journey. And it's a journey where we leverage our arguments that come from our understanding of different sectors, civil society, academia, and policymakers. So we leverage this insight. We leverage every year more work and evidence that this can be helpful to encourage companies to be more open and more engaging with the process, seeing the benefits of this.
That gives me cautious optimism. Thank you, Joanna.
I think it also kind of links into one of the conversation threads that we've had probably throughout the podcast series, which is the debate around voluntary adoption or regulatory enforcement, and just where kind of that needs to be to get the right balance between innovation or freedom of speech, but in a way that doesn't cause adverse harms and does protect those people most vulnerable and in need of protection. So I'm interested to, I said earlier, we all started the things that we were doing in this space around 2016, and Christopher and I were leading at the time a global think tank work stream on digital society, working for and with Thierry Breton, who's of course now introducing in his new role as EU Commissioner, the DMA and the DSA. So I'm interested to understand kind of what your thoughts are around the DSA, especially in the context of a European regulatory enforcement of appropriate and ethical behaviours, and how organisations will indeed react to that, especially those that may be, for example, based in the US, and therefore we've got this debate around geographical different regulations. So what are your thoughts on the DSA?
So yes, the Digital Services Act as a package, because it's worth making the distinction between, the Digital Services Act, for those listening, is a legislative package including the Digital Services Act, the Digital Markets Act, the AI Act, and so on. So I'm definitely not qualified to answer about the wide range of packages. I can talk about the DSA and, to your reference about the impact of these new this new legislation on the other side of the pond, on companies based in the United States. My understanding is that the Digital Markets Act will put a lot of pressure. It may disincentivize them, in terms of their operations in Europe. And I would think that one of the main questions that I have going back to these companies is, how will you be able to ensure the consistency of user experience across borders? So because as I said, this puts pressure on different aspects of their operations, but what I'm looking at is the user, and how will these regulatory provisions and pressures will impact the user. me as a PlayStation player here in the EU, and then in the UK, and so on, and connecting with users around the world, and how the functionalities or age verification processes and very, very specific things that frame the user experience will affect us online. Now, let's go back a little bit to the important thing, this important piece of work that the DSA is and how it relates to our work. First of all, as you said, we started thinking and talking back in 2016. I think it's not a coincidence. Many people started talking around this time because it was the Cambridge Analytica that was revealed at the time. A lot of discussions about the impact of social media on the US elections, the Brexit referendum, and so on. So obviously it was time for action. And we could see that legislation will come. We were hoping and trying to get to pull all the omens together, and we could see that this will be inevitable, especially in the European context. It is what happened with the Snowden revelations, and in 2018 there we are with the GDPR. Unfortunately, the unfortunate thing is that it's a very slow-moving process. And by the time we have measures in place, the tech has advanced and we have reached now the metaverse, and so on and so forth. So what we suggested at the time was the concept of agile regulation, a type of regulation that will be flexible enough to adapt to the rapidly changing technologies. And that is something that we advised is only possible to happen through multi-stakeholder dialogue and continuous communication. Because the other aspect of the problem is the fact that we suffer as societies from politicians' digital illiteracy. I mean, we have seen senators asking Mark Zuckerberg, how do you make money? So, and that again, that was very much in the very beginnings of our conversations. And yeah, so when it comes to the DSA, we were very happy to see Article 28 calling for audits, calling for independent audits, even if it was a very first draft, I think a couple of years ago when we saw the first draft of the DSA. And it was really promising and encouraging, and confirming our hypothesis that someone who is knowledgeable and also independent has to come in and address the problems of self-regulation as well as the illiteracy of politicians. So the one important question that needs to be answered by the politicians is what this independent audit will look like and who will be the one conducting it. So this is where the Internet Commission is at the moment in relation to these legislative developments.
And I suppose the implications and ramifications of the audit itself, I suppose, Joanna, because you're indicating a sense of voluntary self-auditing there. And one of the points you note in the blog talks about the value that transparency and open sharing of audit results might have, both in a kind of disincentivizing bad performance and driving to look good to the world, but also to use it as a competitive differentiator, or an ethical differentiator, I think is how you described it, amongst others, to demonstrate that we actually bring another level of value to society. So I hope that those kind of feelings will come along with that sense of the independent audit.
Yes, that is what we hope, and I think this is another way to link this provision of independent audits also to the DMA. Like, how do you compete? And when companies ask, well, the more you ask, the more pressure you put on us, that makes it difficult. And there are all these narratives of freedom, of innovation. And thankfully, we start putting a break in this techno hype, I would call it, or tech hype, where everything that has to do with technology is fantastic and great, and it's improving humanity and civilization and so on and so forth. Thankfully, this starts kind of fading away because people have experienced in very intimate ways, I would say, the negative impact of unchecked digitalization. So for us, I would say the name of the game is trust. So what we are trying to convey, to convince our interlocutors, our business interlocutors about, is that you cannot go far without trust. And some like expert people in our advisory board have also been saying this, especially when it comes to children's services, right? Be it services designed for children or services used by children that were not intended for children. So unless you provide your audiences and your users with the confidence that they are safe in the environments and on the services they provide, then you can only go so far. And we have seen this with companies, disappearing because users don't feel, sufficiently confident being online, and so on.
And of course, it's a brilliant link into corporate digital responsibility, because I mean, the very first diagram that I remember Christopher and I produced had trust at the heart. Even today, the first principle of the International CDR Manifesto, purpose and trust, the work that the Swiss Digital Initiative is doing, measuring website privacy, safety, security, is all about consumer trust in that. So it's such an important word. I think another key thing, and it links in with the audit conversation, is our ability to measure. And that seems to be kind of a very complex and much debated subject in amongst the various communities and groups that I've no doubt we're all part of. So you've got a digital responsibility framework that you've defined as part of the work that you do. Mm-hmm. How are you approaching the measurement of an organization's digital appropriateness, for want of a better phrase, or digital responsibility? How are you going about measuring an organization, or do you think it's possible to measure an organization's digital responsibility?
Thank you for this question, Rob. It was the first discussion that we had with our advisory board after we published our first report. This is great. Now, how can we measure governance? How can we measure ethical business cultures, which is one of our, conceptual drivers, I would say, the concept of ethical business practice and culture. So that is a very difficult one to achieve. If we are talking about metrics and dashboards and pie charts and so on, we are not in a position to do that. First and foremost, because we don't have, benchmarks. We don't have volume of participation. We have cohorts of 5 companies. So right now I'm speaking about the Internet Commission's process. So it's difficult to speak about metrics, to put it in this way. On the other hand, transparency reports, self-reporting from Facebook or Twitter or other big social media platforms provides us an abundance of metrics, of takedowns, of upheld appeals, and so on and so forth, and government requests that you cannot really make sense of. And we have developed a critique And we have approached actually social media companies with our critique of their transparency reporting, where you cannot tell, the head from the tail, basically. It's just a chaos of numbers and metrics. So in our case, I anticipate that in the future we may be able to produce something that is, more user-friendly, and something that someone can flick through our report and say, oh, this is my takeaway, that companies do well here and this company does well there, and so on and so forth. So we are not there yet because we don't have numbers to produce quantitative outcomes. We do, however, we have figured out a way, we have come up with a solution to start creating benchmarks. Because in order to measure as well, you need to have a definition of what good looks like, as we tend to say. And this is something that we were missing. And I mentioned in the blog that the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals were a good, very useful guide for us, in the sense that they're also universally accepted, at least from a semantics point of view, because there's a lot to unpack when it comes to, how fit they are for different contexts. So we use this as a compass, if you will, and a good reference point. And then we turned to the corporate, the CSR corporate social responsibility literature, to understand how things have been done so far, how this, social responsibility has been measured until now. And I must say, we have found a very useful matrix against which we were able to map, I wouldn't say rank, we are not in a position to rank yet, but map the quality of different practices. And we have, over the past 2 years, we managed to create a bank of roughly 50 practices in different aspects of the practice of content moderation. And we were also able to identify patterns and trends. Very, I'm very reluctant to use the terms, but it's one first step to that direction. And I am anticipating that we will see more once more black boxes are opened. So we have seen, embedding user voice and consultation outcomes to your work and to the design of your service is a great practice that which is also responding to the expectations of policymakers. It shows that you are on the front foot when you do it. You are way ahead in the game, and it shows that you have respect for your user. It shows that you understand what their expectations from your platform is, and you are ready to respond when harms occur. So this is just one example, one of my favorite examples of seeing companies embedding user feedback and user voice, and doing it not just in the process of consultations, but, and I don't want to be perceived as some kind of promotion here, but the Tinder example always strikes me as one of the best practices, where they make sure they understand, how user-generated content is received and perceived on both sides of the communication. Another example is when I send something that their AI automatically detects as potentially harmful, they will ask me, are you sure you want to send this? Something more or less we have seen in different services. And then I say, yes, okay. And then on the recipient side, the recipient, once they get the message, they're asked, are you okay with this? And this is a very useful way of training their technology and of understanding user needs, a very smart way. So we have seen all these good practices. We have seen bad practices as well, which we anonymize. I must say this, we anonymize them because our goal is to incentivize the companies to bring us the intel, the information to improve the ecosystem. And while our intention is not to name them and shame them, it's an exercise that will work in the benefit of everyone rather than, a political tool, something that can be weaponized.
Absolutely. And I think for me, I mean, all of that emphasizes that there's a big challenge for us all ahead. We've all got to understand how we do begin to benchmark or measure organizations, maybe, and indeed to highlight great practices, and yes, to highlight things that need to change. And regulation, DSA or otherwise, is a key part of that to provide an impetus for change, an acceleration for change. We've also got a massive challenge around training and development of a capability that can actually execute that, whether we call it audit, digital audit or otherwise, and to equally understand the role that technology has in enabling us to do that, because we should be able to audit some of those things in an automated way, verifying bias, for example, in an algorithm. We should be able to detect. I know that we can already detect that in an automated way. So I think the key thing is to continue to share and to continue to the communities around digital responsibility that are evolving across the globe support and help each other in terms of push things forward, nudge things in the right direction. And I guess there's always that backdrop against the things that we can continue to see in the market, continue to see in the global dynamics. Who would have forecast the pandemic and the impact that might have? Who would have forecast the position in Ukraine and the impact that might have? Thank you, Joanna, in terms of the conversation. Christopher, any last thoughts from yourself?
Yeah, first of all, it's been fascinating to hear your thoughts today, Joanna, and the work of the Internet Commission. I'm so grateful that there are other people out there exploring these topics and able to talk so passionately about them. As Rob said, it would be remiss of us not to ask you about the news hot off the press about Elon Musk and his recent takeover of Twitter. He's talking online a lot about driving freedom of speech and other new concepts with his newfound power. Just interested in the context of what we've discussed, how you felt about that whole piece at the moment.
Yes. It's of course very relevant, and it's a very complex issue that often I can see on Twitter being treated, I would say, in a very, very simplistic way, yes or no, and it's good or it's bad, and so on. It's very hard. It's a very complex and difficult, answer to give. I must say that one of the key arguments in Elon Musk's discourse these days has been, I'm going to create more freedom of speech, and the backbone of democracy is freedom of speech, and so on. And my response to that, first and foremost, my first reaction is, no, this is not true. This is only partly true, and freedom comes with responsibilities, like rights come with the responsibilities, and freedom of expression is a human right. And that means responsibility means checks and balances. So responsibility means accountability. So mechanisms that will keep the Elon Musks of the world accountable. We want empowered institutions that will do that. And that is part of the work that the European Commission has to do now, figure out what these institutions will look like. So, yeah, there is no black and white answer. I will just, again, use a user's tweet about this recently, just a few hours ago, who said that no matter how toxic this environment becomes, no matter how difficult an Elon Musk may make Twitter, we will stick around and make sure that things, work better, or at least not enable and make any kind of toxic work, easy. We don't want to become enablers, so we will stick around and oversee.
Joanna, thank you. Much appreciated for the whole conversation, and all the best for the next issue of the accountability report published later this year.
Thank you so much for having me, Rob and Christopher.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you, everyone.